Sometimes we do make decisions that we're like, what was I thinking? Like, what our adult self, our present day self can see clearly this was not the best option. Massive red flags. But again, it's that 8-year-old going, no, date this guy because he's like dad. And maybe if he loves us, we'll finally get that love that we never got. And there we are with the emotionally unavailable addict once again.
Are you living the life that you really want? Because I struggled with this for ages. For years, I was working hard. I was hustling. I thought I was doing everything right. I was trying to tick the boxes of achievements that were supposed to make me happy, make us happy. And well, that wasn't happening. And that's why I'm so grateful to be sharing you this amazing conversation with Christine Hasler, because she has an absolute gift when it comes to knowing what is standing in someone's way and then being able to unblock what is actually holding them back from being able to get where they truly wanting to go. So in this episode, we really dive into inner child work. What is inner child work and what does it really mean to be doing it, and why do we want to be doing that as well? We really dive into as well, what are the patterns that can be holding us back, and then what is the actual practices? What is it when it comes to actually doing the work that can be so powerful that I know so many people out there are talking to, but I don't know about you, a lot of people out there talking about doing spiritual work, but a lot of it seems a little bit fluffy, a little bit mumbo jumbo, a little bit not palpable, like what the hell do I do today to actually make my life better? That's what we get into in this episode. Now, if you're joining us on the podcast, please make sure to go join us on the YouTube channel, because you'll be able to see Christine and I coming together at her beautiful home. And is also, if you haven't, please do so on sharing this episode out on social. Please tag myself and Christine as well, as I would love to personally say thank you for joining us in this amazing episode. Firstly, Christine, I just want to say thank you so much. You are in the absolute throes of motherhood right now, looking spectacular. And
looking very sleep deprived.
You're looking amazing. You're
Well,
looking amazing.
Thank you.
I'll happily say that for you. And I want to start with actually what we said we're going to go into, but I want to go straight into it as well.
Sure.
Because as we were just saying, my wife, Lauren, she's been pregnant or breastfeeding, been a mother for a decade now. And it's been really interesting as a father and a husband to be able to watch the amazing transformation that a woman goes through into motherhood and being able to traverse across those planes. Mm-hmm. How are you finding it?
Bumpy. I'm only 10 weeks in to having my daughter, so I'm still very, very, very new and still in the adjustment. And our mutual friend, Kate Reardon, said to me on a voice note when I was probably 2 weeks in, she said, a lot of like your mothering instincts actually don't kick in until 6 weeks. So if you feel like you don't know what the F you're doing at first, that's normal, which was good, because I think there's this expectation that as a woman, as soon as the baby comes out or as soon as you're pregnant, you're supposed to step into this archetype of mother and know what you're doing. And I didn't, it was a very intense birth. Our daughter had a tongue tie when she was first born, so we had to deal with that, which is very common. And being sleep deprived, and going from when I was pregnant, it was self-care, meditation every day, exercising every day, working if I wanted to, taking naps, dates with my husband. And then in a day, it all goes. Every single bit of it goes. And there's this new human that you're responsible, especially as a woman, if you choose to breastfeed, you're completely responsible for keeping that little one alive. And so it's been all the feels. I think that not as many women as I would like talk really honestly about postpartum as my baby starts to cry when we're in this conversation. And there's often this expectation that it's this like blissful baby moon kind of thing. And there are beautiful moments like that. There are so many moments where I'd be looking at my daughter and cry, or my husband and I would be laying in bed and there she'd be, and we'd be skin to skin, and it'd be, and the oxytocin is pouring. But then there's moments where you're sleep deprived, you're getting used to your new identity, you're snapping at each other and then going, oh, why are we snapping at each other? The baby's crying, you don't know what to do. And you're also going, wait a second, where am I? Who am I? And as an entrepreneur and someone who identified so much with my mission in life and my purpose in life and my work in the world, and having, I waited later in life to have my baby. So I had 2 decades of running my business, traveling the world, pretty much complete freedom. And again, overnight, that really, really shifts. And it's beautiful because I really realized how, this is probably too strong of a word, it's not selfish, but self-focused I was.
Yes.
I mean, I was always focused on service and, you know, the people I could serve and all that type of stuff. But at the end of the day, I could do what I wanted. You know, if I wanted to eat lunch, I could go eat lunch. And now that isn't the same, it feels really good to pour my energy into another being and go, okay, well, it's been all about me for most of my life. And what a blessing that I get to really pour my energy into this little human. And I have to watch that sometimes because I went from someone who was really excellent with self-care to really having none at all. And I don't know if you felt this as the father, but every moment I'm away from her, I feel guilty. And I miss her.
I'm suffering from it so badly right now, being away.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking.
It's so hard. And it's such a paradox because you love what you do and you want to do that, or and you know self-care is good, or you know going on date night with your wife is a good thing to do for your kids. But it's this inner conflict because at the same time you feel the pull of, well, I should be with my child. And so that's another thing that I'm battling is I miss parts of my life, but yet I want to be with my daughter at the same time. So it's like this inner tug that I think just takes some time to get used to. And I know I'm so new into it and I'll eventually find my way. But both my husband, Steph, and I talk about how we're celebrating and there's so much love and we're also grieving old parts of us. And even our relationship, like our relationship will never be the same. It's totally, that chapter's done. And I don't want, and I think I've been nervous to talk about this because people will say, oh, well, you're so ungrateful to have a child and there are many people who can't have children.
It doesn't come off like that at all. And I love that you're speaking to this because I feel like coming into this conversation, I knew where this kind of wanted to go, but this is so much better already and I really appreciate this. How have you started, like what's your inner dialogue at the moment working through the identity change?
Well, it's a lot of who am I now and who do I want to become? And as an entrepreneur, there's so much more I could plan, you know, in terms of, okay, I have this goal and I want to accomplish this thing. And I could sort of create my identity as an entrepreneur as I went. That's such a fun part of being an entrepreneur. But as a parent, I have no idea who she is and who she's going to be. And one of my number one intentions as a parent is to get out of her way and to let her show me who she wants to be rather than me mold her into who I think she needs to be. And so I'm finding my entrepreneurial skills don't really translate to parenting in so many ways. And I'm such a problem solver. That's one of the ways I've been successful. It's like, okay, there's a problem, I find a solution. And with a child, like she has gas and like, I want to fix it. I want to problem solve. I want to know what course I can buy to teach me how to like get rid of gas and reflux. And it's not like that. It's like children are a mystery in so many ways. So that's a big part of the identity shift is what worked for me in this chapter of my life isn't working for me over here. And the other thing that's been challenging is both my husband and I do similar work. And we're out in the world doing similar work and love to move our bodies and love to socialize and all those things. And I'm seeing him go back to those things, or they never really stopped. And it's on pause for me. And so finding my identity as his wife and a partner in a new way, because we used to be, you know, kind of on the same page. And now his life and my life are very different. So finding that identity as a wife is a huge thing. And then, you know, I think that the best way I've described it lately is I'm in the in-between. You know, I'm saying goodbye to who I was and I don't yet know who I am. And I'm just in this mystery of letting it reveal itself.
Where the Buddhists describe the different bardos, they describe the bardo that we're in now as the bardo of becoming. And I feel like that's what you're speaking to now is you're in a bardo of becoming, you're in kind of like in between world. And I love how consciously you're working through and choosing how you're going to get through this, because there are so many things I found as becoming a parent, so many things aren't talked about. And so many things taboo to talk about,
Right.
where they just needed to be talked about, and for us to be able to, like, I remember, as I was saying before, like with our first Arlo, Lauren's waters broke at 2 p.m. and we're walking back in the house at 11 p.m. and I was holding the bassinet with Arlo and I was like, our child is here. Like, this is what is going on? I had no idea. And at the time, she was born in Sydney. I only had 2 weeks before I had to fly back to Dubai to continue on with business and everything like that. So it was an extremely tumultuous time that was very testing. I'd love to know, what are the messages or beliefs or misbeliefs that you want to see talked about more in the world of parenting, and especially with the audience of entrepreneurs?
Yeah. Well, one, that you're supposed to know what you're doing, especially as the female, that you're supposed to know what you're doing. Two, that you're supposed to do it all on your own. We luckily had a lot of support, and at times I felt guilty for that, because I felt like I should be the one that's holding my baby all the time. I should be sleeping with her all the time. She should be on me all the time. And that wasn't possible in order for me to heal, it just wasn't. And so I think that's one thing that needs to be talked about is the mother. Like, all the attention kind of goes on the baby and taking care of the baby. And, as the mother, you just went through this massive physical experience that you're still in. You're pregnant 10 months and it's not like 10 days later, your body just snaps back. And the emotional and hormonal cascade and everything that's happening, I really want to speak to supporting the mother more and knowing that, it's normal to feel overwhelmed. It's normal to have thoughts like, oh my God, what have I done? Can I put her back in? Like, what have I done? Yeah. And then immediate guilt following that. Yeah. And the grief that comes up, in addition to all the joy that comes up and the strain that it can be on our relationship, and how, there's no one, I'm sure you've seen this with 4 children, you're much more experienced than I am, but there's not a one size fits all approach for children. Like, I compare in comparison in parenthood, oh my gosh, that will leave you with sleepless nights, even more. You'll be even more sleep deprived.
That gives you goosebumps, you saying that, yeah.
And man, have I engaged in that. And I see other mothers who are able to not just co-sleep, but bed share with their babies and wear them all day. And I have a baby that likes her space. Yeah. She doesn't like to be worn all day. Yeah. She likes her space. She grunts a lot in her sleep. So, I can't sleep right next to her all the time. And so I've had to let go of a lot of like the way I think it should look and go, okay, who is my child and what does she really need? And what do I really need too? Because I've coached mothers for years on mom guilt. And I've said to them, and now I'm having to really practice what I preach. I've said to them, your child is going to be better off if you're taking care of yourself. You're teaching self-care through modeling, right? And so I think as mothers, we fall into martyrdom quite a bit of like, I will sacrifice my sleep, my health, my well-being, everything for my child. But what is that teaching them? And this is what I'm in right now, because I know that intellectually, and I know that taking care of myself and honoring myself is important. And again, I'm so new. I'm still in the 4th trimester. So this is really the time to be all in with her. And for people listening, we're at my house. She's downstairs. Like, it's a big deal for me to even be doing this. But over time, it's going to be important that she sees me shining my light and doing self-care and not, just smothering her all the time because of my own guilt of not being there. So I think this is, again, I'm no expert. This is all things I'm navigating, but it's like, how much do we do as parents because we're motivated by guilt, and how much is just pure love? And I think those two go together a lot of the time, because yes, I love my daughter and I want to be with her. And right now I'm really enjoying this conversation. So it's really guilt that would have me go, I can't do this. I got to go back downstairs, versus love, because I know she's in good hands. I know she's been with me all day. She'll be with me after this. And that's loving. But the guilt could talk me into, oh, you're a terrible mother for doing this.
This is beautiful. I really enjoy that. When you brought up how you're navigating the relationship between yourself and Steph, I find it really interesting, especially before our newest daughter, Noah, was born. Laura and I were having date nights 2 times a week, and that was spectacular. And it's been really interesting because the change for us now has been our date nights have actually changed to doing a sauna and ice bath and a coffee sitting in the morning sun between 7 to 8 a.m. Hopefully a couple of times a week for us to be able to have that connection time.
Yeah.
Because the only other time we'd have together would be after I put the other girls to bed between like 7 p.m. and we're asleep by 8:30.
Yeah.
And that's not it's not quality time because we've both had huge days.
Yeah.
We're tired, exhausted.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting how I feel like parenting has been such a great teacher of me having to let go of my attachments to the way I thought things were supposed to be and how I just have to accept it for what it is. And especially looking at each of my daughters and like they are so different. Like they come into this world with their own uniqueness and I can't parent them the same and I have to treat them differently. Yeah. And it was finally when I realized I had to accept each one for the way they are. Suddenly everything just lowered down. Yeah. So when it comes to the relationship side of things, I'd love to ask this. How as men, if I can speak in generalities, how as men can we best support a new mother?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I think it depends on the mother. And I'd say ask her. But one thing I will say to men is, speaking from my own experience and talking to other friends, a lot, especially when we're newly postpartum, we don't know what we want or need, you know? So first of all, don't talk about how tired you are. Yeah. But I think it's things like I would love just neck rubs when I'm breastfeeding. Just simple, just come up behind and rub my neck, or give compliments. Remind her of how beautiful she is, how amazing she is. Remind her, like, compliment her on who she is as a mother, but see her as your wife and as a woman independent of that identity as well. At least for me, new motherhood was completely overwhelming. There was so much information. And so any clutter in my house just added to the noise that was in my head. So anything you can do to keep the space like organized and nice is super helpful. And listen, like not a lot of advice giving, but really, really listening and being present. You know, one of the things that means the most to me is when Steph doesn't have his phone and he's just there and he's present and he's listening. So, and this isn't just for new motherhood. This is just for, you know, parenthood in general. I think, speaking for myself, I want to feel like my husband's in it with me. Yeah. And we had these conversations before we had children, is I didn't want to feel like I'm carrying, you know, 75% and you're like evening and weekend dad. That kind of old school thing doesn't really work for me. And that's not what I think Athena wants either. That's our daughter. Yeah. And so being that involved, proactive parent and being the advocate for your partner or wife taking care of herself, like doing whatever you can to make sure she's supported, to know how to take care of the baby. Like every dad should be able to, you know how to know when the baby needs to feed, know how to change a diaper and be like, Mom, you go for 4 hours. I got this. And so that the mom can feel like, okay, dad's got this under control. So that she doesn't feel like it's all on her. I think that's the biggest thing.
It's beautiful. I appreciate that. And I know going through the throes of it all, because I get asked by a lot of soon-to-be or new dads questions of this sort. And I think you sharing that is actually really important because this is something that's not spoken about a lot. Yeah. So thank you.
What do you think is most helpful as a dad? Like, what have you found? You're now four deep, so.
You spoke briefly to it, and I think as a male and definitely being a problem solver, it's wanting to jump into the situation and fix it right there and then, where I have to soften up and just be present for Lauren. Right. Let her speak, let her be seen, let her be heard, and then be able to solve it when the right time is to be solved. Yeah. Not for me just to jump in and want to like fight the fire straight away.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I think the answer that really comes to me is the need just to be compassionate.
Yeah, that's a huge one. That's a request I have of Cephala. I'm like, just be compassionate. I know I'm making no sense and talking about the same thing 50 million times over and over
Lauren
again.
will say the exact same things
Yeah.
as well. And it can be, I have found it frustrating, and it has been very testing, and I have enjoyed the process immensely as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, like in my best self, I want to say, I want to be as compassionate as I possibly can.
Because we worry a lot. We're wired to worry as mothers. We are. And we can be hypervigilant. We can be like obsessive about helping our child. And it's important to just have compassion for that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Can we take a bit of a head snapping turn in the
course.
conversation? I really want to talk to you about inner child work.
Yep.
Everything that I've seen you talk about to this topic, I've loved so much. And so for me personally, I had depression early last year, and it was going through some inner child work with some other things that really unlocked a lot for me. It was mind-blowing. Still to this day, when I close my eyes and picture it, I can have my younger self with me. He's always to my left. I can see the little Chris, and much of the time it was just him needing to be seen, heard, and to have, for me, it was a lack of guidance through certain times of my age, and also through, I lost respect for my father in some ways due to things that I saw, and so I felt like I lost that guiding light as well.
Yeah.
But before we dive into this, how would you, if somebody doesn't really truly understand what inner child work, can you conceptualize this for us?
Sure.
And let's start peeling the onion.
Sure. So the inner child is a psychological reality. It's not some woo-woo life coachy term that we just made up. We all have parts. So as human beings, we have these different aspects or parts of us. It doesn't mean we're multiple personality. That's an actual disorder. We all have these different parts. And the inner child represents basically the youngest part of us, but not just the baby, toddler, little kid, like pretty much all the way up to adolescence. And it's the part that's most connected to our intuition, our sensitivity, our creativity. It also holds a lot of our pain, because most of the things that happened to us or didn't happen to us in childhood set up, who we are in our life, set up our belief systems, set up our attachment style, set up our personality patterns, so on and so forth. So the inner child basically holds the wisdom to why we are the way we are, because that's when the computer programming all went in. And it's an aspect of us that really needs to feel safe, really needs to feel seen, really needs to feel loved. And if it doesn't, it will act out. And a lot of us don't know that a lot of the sabotaging behaviors we do, or procrastinating, or feeling overwhelmed, or feeling insecure about something, or having anxiety, or relationship patterns we get in, a lot of it is the inner child acting out. So for example, if you have an inner child that does not feel safe, that never ever felt safe, you're less likely to put yourself out there. You're less likely to take risks. If you had an inner child who always lived in chaos, you actually might create chaos because that's what's familiar to you. If you have an inner child who had a very, very strict mother, nothing was ever good enough for her, then you will have that in your head. Like, you will parent yourself that way. You will be really hard on yourself. So a lot of us don't realize that so much of what is driving our behavior is subconscious and is coming from the inner child. The inner child is always trying to get his or her needs met. And whatever needs weren't met as a child, we try to get met. And this is why, so many of my clients come to me and they're like, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I dated that person, or I can't believe I messed up that interview, or I can't believe I made this money and then lost it. And I'm like, you didn't. Your 8-year-old did. Your 13-year-old did. Your 5-year-old did. And it helps us kind of give ourselves a break, because sometimes we do make decisions that we're like, what was I thinking? Like, what our adult self, our present day self can see clearly this was not the best option. Massive red flags. But again, it's that 8-year-old going, no, date this guy because he's like dad. And maybe if he loves us, we'll finally get that love that we never got. And there we are with the emotionally unavailable addict once again. So that's why it's so important to do inner child work, to know this aspect of us, not just for our own healing, but also to really tap more into our creativity. When anyone's questioning what their passion is or what they want to do with their life, I ask them, what did you enjoy doing as a child? And it doesn't necessarily translate. Like if you enjoyed playing fireman, it doesn't mean, okay, go be a fireman. But there's probably a part of you that loves to serve, that loves a little adrenaline, that loves to work as a team. As a child, my favorite things to play were teacher, which is basically what I do and professionally, and bank, which is what I do as an entrepreneur, And there's so many keys in that. And so if we continue to neglect the inner child because we don't want to look at our pain, then we never really unleash our true passion and purpose, because it's often underneath the pain. And the inner child doesn't feel safe enough to express if it doesn't feel safe and loved and seen. And so we have to do the inner work to make the inner child feel that way. And then we have access to all the wisdom that part of us has.
I love this. Okay. There's so many directions I want to take this. Let's first
That's
go.
a very long definition.
No, this is
Sorry.
amazing. It was really good. How do you classify the inner work?
Yeah.
When someone says like, okay, Christina, I get it. I need to do the work. What is the work in your eyes?
What works for you, basically. For some people, it's therapy. For some people, it's coaching. For some people, it's Tony Robbins. For some people, it's ayahuasca. And I wouldn't jump to that, but for some people, that's what works, So it really depends on the person, and it's all of those things. And I mentioned ayahuasca, and I want to caveat, I wouldn't do any kind of medicine journey until you've done some kind of therapy and inner work, because that stuff can really bring it up. And if you're not ready, it can really blow you out. So I would say the work is, what is that first step you can take that's a stretch, that makes you start to confront some things that you don't necessarily want to confront, but still feel safe enough. So for a lot of people, that's therapy or coaching, because it's not that high risk. It's just talking to one other person. You're not altering your state of mind through breath works or somatics or any of that kind of thing. You're just in a safe zone of speaking about it. So that's often the first step, speaking about it with someone who has some training, who can guide you, who can hold safe space, who can ask you questions. Then generally the next step is working more on that emotional level. So that same person, or maybe it's a different person or a different modality, where you're going back and you're actually allowing yourself to feel. Because there's one thing to talk about something, there's another thing to actually let yourself feel what you're actually speaking about. So that often is the next layer, like allowing our emotions, emotion, energy and motion, to come to the surface. And then usually it's healing of memories. So most emotion, most things that upset us in present day reality are tied back to something that happened as a child. And so going back and doing that work, speaking to the inner child, a lot of the ways that I do it is through something called the empty chair process, which is based on Gestalt therapy, where you as the adult is in one chair, the inner child, you can have whatever age you want is in the other, and you're moving back and forth and talking. Or you can be the adult self and write with your dominant hand, and the inner child can respond back with the non-dominant hand. But starting to look at that little one inside of you to see what wisdom they have, looking at pictures of you as a child and connecting that way is another great way. And then it's sort of like where the work takes you from there. But I do think the beginning, the first step is always finding a safe person to start to speak about things with. That's usually always the first step. And some people, it's, well, I can just take this course, or I can just read this book, or I can just listen to that podcast. And that's helpful. But there's something that happens in the presence of another human being. And it can be over Zoom or phone or whatever in today's world. But having a witness to your story, to your share, is an important part of getting the momentum to continue the work.
For myself, I did psychotherapy for a bit over 18 months, and that was amazing. We delved into inner child work. Then I've worked with other therapists that was just specifically for inner child work as well, and that was incredible. I've done the psychedelic thing many times through different medicines. That was also good, but I don't really want to go there. Because I think a lot of the power of it for me was in the conversations with these people going into it. One question that comes up, and I'm selfishly asking this for sure, is if there was a calendar of how often we should be doing this, Is there any sort of guidance that you see that comes to being able to answer like how often you should frequent it? Because I feel like I went very intense and I feel like I got some amazing results, epiphanies, learnings from it.
Yeah.
But now having this conversation, I was like, I haven't gone back to my inner child recently for quite some time, actually, to be perfectly honest. Is there a kind of calendar that we could be looking at for this?
Yes and no. I think every day we should check in with ourselves. And, I recently checked in with little Christine and she was so sad. And this is going to make me emotional, but I'm very hormonal. She was so sad because now that Athena's here, she was feeling so neglected. She's like, are you still going to mother me? You're still going to love me? Like, we've come so far. Like, where have you been? And I think back to the parenting thing, when we have our own children, it's so much easier to neglect our inner child because we're taking care of our children. And often our own inner child is like, oh, great, I'm second fiddle again, or third or fourth or fifth. So I think that daily check-in, one thing that really works for me is one hand on my heart, one hand on my belly, and just how am I doing in there? How am I doing? And that kind of continual self-work will alert us to when we need to engage in more work with another, whether it's back to psychotherapy or to a workshop, or we need to go on a silent retreat or whatever it may be. And I also think the other kind of calendar alert is when we're really triggered, when something's up, when we're in a loop. Like I noticed I was looping about some things, and some of my hypervigilance was really up, which to me is an indicator of like my PTSD response. And so I was like, oh man, I've got to process some of the birth trauma. Like I need to do this. And I know it needs to be a somatic experience. It can't be a talk thing. And that's my calendar alert is, okay, you're in hypervigilance. There's some unprocessed stuff here. It's time to get some help with this. So the great thing about self-awareness is that we know when we need support, when we need to dive back in. I don't believe in constantly working on ourselves. I believe in living your life, like living your life, enjoying your life, and doing that daily check-in. And when stuff comes up, you deal with it. And, in relationship, like Steph and I, we've worked with different coaches and therapists in the past, and we're not working with one now, but we are pretty good at, if something's up, like we deal with it. We don't brush it under the rug, because everybody knows how in relationship, if you do that, you're just going to stack resentment and you're just going to grow apart from each other. And so we wouldn't want to do that in a relationship. Why would we want to do that for ourselves, right? Yeah. So it's kind of easy to just like brush things aside when we're triggered. When it's in relationship, it's in your face every day. But we need to do the same thing in our relationship with ourselves. And so to me, that's the schedule or calendar, is when we're like, oh, I'm looping in something. I keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result, or I feel really stuck, or I'm just not myself. Those are the alarm signals that it's time to do the work.
I love that. I love the awareness with that. I'm going to try and bridge these two subjects now, which is why I've tried to do this. Let's see if this works. How, as parents, can we best have our children grow so that they don't have issues, problems, inner child? Like, as a parent, I'm constantly thinking, what is the meaning that my daughter that's in front of me is making of what's happening right now? And wanting to be able to obviously give them what they need to best grow into the amazing human beings that they're going to become, and also me not needing to do things that aren't needed at the end of the day either. How do I not screw my children up?
Well, you will. You probably already have, as have I. Well, I can't answer that as a parent because my daughter's so little, but I can answer that as someone who has coached thousands and thousands of people's inner children. The biggest thing is love. That's and consistency. Like seriously, love and consistency. If we look at the secure attachment style, that is the attachment. So there's two attachment styles, secure and insecure. And the insecure attachment styles are anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. And we all want the secure. The secure means I can connect, I can love, I can open my heart, but I'm not codependent, I'm not enmeshed, I'm not an anxious, jealous mess. And that comes from parenting that's consistent but not perfect. So the key to secure attachment parenting is repair. You mess up, you own it. You communicate with your child. You make them feel safe and seen and get out of their way. Like, not mute their expression, have them show you who they are, and create a place where they're safe to thrive. And I think also let them struggle too. Like, they got to figure stuff out for themselves. But, some of the things that I wish more parents would say to their kid is, I know this is really hard, and I'm here, totally here with all the big feelings, and you got this. You are going to figure this out. I completely believe in you and completely trust you. And no matter what, you can't mess it up. And if you feel like you do, I'm here. And that type of creating that safety, but teaching them to fish versus fishing for them. And I know this is going to be my biggest challenge as a parent, because we don't want to see our kids suffer. But they've got to. And the two things I see as a coach are adults who fail to thrive. They're still, I call it adultolescence. They're still like adolescents in some way in their money or their eating or their relationships or whatever it may be, because they had parents that were over-involved, over-strict, domineering, or, adults that just feel like helpless little kids still because they didn't have the parenting, or just so scared because they had abusive parents or toxic parents, or parents that created that more disorganized or anxious or avoidant attachment style. So we're gonna mess them up. Well, let me actually, I'm gonna correct myself. We're going to make what we think are mistakes.
Yeah.
And we're going to do things that piss them off and that they'll talk about in therapy maybe 20 years from now. Hopefully not a lot, though. Hopefully we aren't going to give them a lot of material. I hope that my daughter says about me, I know my mom loved me and she helped me become me. And I know I could go to her with anything, and I always felt safe with her. Like, if she can say that, I feel like I've done a pretty good job.
It's amazing. I absolutely love that. And if there's two things I can say to that, I think so far the absolute most amazing, joyful experiences as a parent has been seeing when my daughters are proud of themselves for going through tough times. Like, Sunny didn't want to do surfing lessons, but she did it, and she was just so proud of herself, and it just moved me so much. Those times of when I know that they were scared, or they were just they were going to get roughed up in one way or another. Yeah. But then they got through it. Like, I was just like, oh, this is what it's for. Yeah. Like, that is selfishly so much for me to be able to take from that as well. It's huge. Then the other point is, I very much think of what my parents would call mistakes that they've made. My parents were 17 when they had me, so we very much grew up together. I love that we went through that, because it's created who I am today. And I wouldn't be this person today if they hadn't done exactly what they had done. So I'm very grateful for what they've been able to do. Christina, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. I appreciate you so much. You're incredible. I don't want to take you away from Athena any longer. I'm feeling
well, I saw Steph come home, so I feel better.
Okay, good.
He's down there.
I'm feeling bad about taking you away from Athena. Before I let you go, how can someone listening right now, how do they learn more about you and what you do?
Well, my favorite thing that I do is my podcast, and I coach people live on the air. So if you want to hear, there's 2 episodes a week, and one is a life coaching session where it's unscripted, unedited, unproduced. You get to hear me coach someone, and then I talk about what I did. And then I do sometimes I do interviews on the weekends. But that's the best way if you're curious about inner child or want to know more about life coaching. I combine life coaching and spiritual psychology. Those are my 2 backgrounds. That's the best place to go and listen. It's called Over It and On With It. And then everything else is just my name, Christine Hassler, Instagram and website and all that stuff.
Amazing. Well, I'm going to sure to link to all of that. Thank Christina, you're a remarkable woman. You're doing an amazing job, and I thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.